This first one is to Dr. Dittmar. China plans to send a crewed mission to the moon in the 2030s. The European Space Agency has discussed a moon village. Assuming flat budgets, how is America's leadership in space impacted by continuing the ISS into 2028 or even into 2030? For every year we extend the ISS, are we delaying the development of new deep space projects by a year?
Mr. Chairman, first of all, I don't know about the one-to-one relationship that you just described, which is that for every year that station continues to fly, there's a delay by a year. I would not really know how to go about answering that question. What I would say is that there is no question that under a flat budget, you're basically in a zero-sum game unless you're able to find ways to offset that game with either significant cost reductions or the influx of additional revenue from some source, whether that source is coming from commercial ventures or whether it's coming by contributions of international partners or in some other way. So with regard to continuing to fly the ISS and while still planning to move into cislunar space and begin to generate activities there, what's going to happen, okay, is that the things I was already sort of talking about in testimony, in order for the station to continue, you're going to have to find ways to reduce costs. The clearest way that we see that happening right now is through the advent of things like public-private partnerships, which Eric mentioned, as a way of sort of doing acquisition that's a little bit different. We need acquisition reform in general, and so that's one path to be able to reduce costs. Continuing to encourage the existing partners who are developing, corporate partners who are with NASA who are developing deep space exploration activities to find ways to reduce costs in production as well as in operations is another way to reduce costs, try and get costs down on that end as opposed to the ISS end. I think the thing that's most important is to look at the entire portfolio of activities that NASA is considering and try and find opportunities for cost reduction everywhere along the way. I think we make a bit of a mistake. We're not thinking about things systematically if we're just focusing on reducing costs associated with ISS. I think we have to look at it across the board. Where can we find cost reductions in the entire human spaceflight enterprise and/or opportunities to bring in additional revenues across that entire spaceflight enterprise? And I think that's what we really have to focus on, and NASA has to focus on very carefully.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Stallmer, NASA has invested a lot of money in the United States commercial space companies in the hopes of developing a self-sustaining space infrastructure. Could the ISS be self-sustaining without NASA subsidizing transportation or operations costs? Do any of your members have plans to offer low Earth orbit space station services in the near term, absent NASA development funding?
That's a great question. I appreciate that. I think as Mary Lynne had said earlier, echoing the public-private partnerships that NASA has engaged in with the commercial sector, I think we are already seeing the NASA investment in these partnerships are already paying huge dividends. We're seeing this in the cost to access to space with the Commercial Crew Program, the tremendous reduction in costs that has afforded NASA, as well as coming online next year, the Commercial Crew Program that will be returning astronauts to the space station. Those are already yielding great benefits for NASA. I see also the value of what a lot of the commercial companies are doing currently on the space station with, most recently, the investment that Bigelow Aerospace has made with the module that they attach to the space station. I think that you're going to see commercial benefits yielded from that, not just on the space station, but for future missions outside and off the space station. And also the manufacturing that we'll see, the potential there, a very, very small investment that NASA made years ago, just a few years ago, on 3D printing with Made in Space and the benefits that is reaping right now. So I'm very excited about the returns that NASA will see from the investment in the commercial community.
Thank you very much. And then finally, Mr. Gerstenmaier, at a 2015 NASA Advisory Council meeting, you were quoted as saying, "We're going to get out of ISS as quickly as we can, whether it gets filled in by the private sector or not. NASA's vision is we're trying to move out." Is this statement still accurate?
I think the accuracy in the statement or the discussion is really we need to do a transition. As was described in some of the earlier testimony, it's not good to end space station and then try to start exploration. There needs to be a smooth handoff from the one activity on space station to the exploration activity moving forward. I think it's also wrong to assume that exploration and ISS are competing with each other. They're really helping each other. We're working today on space station to understand the physiological problems of being in microgravity on the human body. Those are not fully resolved yet. We just recently discovered several years ago the intracranial pressure problem that causes vision problems on station. If that was not discovered on space station, we would have carried that potentially with us into Moon-Mars activities, and it could have been detrimental to our crews.
Yep.
So that work and that research is absolutely critical to what we're doing going forward. We're also testing Orion life support systems today on station. So I think there's a transition. But I think NASA's predominant role should be to move to deep space, take the private sector along with us to deep space, and continue that activity moving forward. And to do that, we need to relinquish the NASA role in low Earth orbit. So it's a natural transition. It's not quite as stark as maybe it was described in the quotes that you previously read to me.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gerstenmaier. I now recognize Mr. Barrow.
Thank you.